So over the years, primarily my influences were in printmaking. My step-grandfather was a printmaker as well as a potter, and I go in the summer and spend summers with him, and he was a big influence for sure for me. I was also very blessed and lucky that my high school offered more unusual type classes that it was quite large, and it drafting was one of them, and I took architectural drafting. My high school offered things that most colleges offered, and I feel quite lucky that I was able to go there. I stayed and graduated with extra credits because there was all these art-related things that I could take, that I wanted to take and take advantage of. And even after I graduated high school, I kept going back and making use of their dark room, and I became friendly with the instructors and learned a lot through them. I have a creative family, and my mom painted when I was younger and grew up with that, and my birth father was a poet, and my mom's background is also science, so nature and looking at things under microscopes and having that as an influence. Definitely I see obvious connections to where I've gone in my life. Okay, so what did I write? I studied as a graphic designer because having art in my family, I knew that that wasn't a way of easily surviving as an artist, and graphic design seemed like a good route to go, because then I could have that creative urge fixed, and it would also give me an income. So I started off at Seneca College in Toronto, and that's where I primarily grew up. We immigrated from South America to Montreal and then to Toronto. So Toronto is where I guess technically I grew up, where I went to school and got most of my training as a graphic designer. Seneca College was not really the area of graphic design. I guess, what did they call it? Design arts, which to me all those words are all meaning the same thing, but they're not. Design arts was more like storefront and architectural, and it was anyway, I did end up going to George Brown as well, so I did 4 years of graphic design in lots of different areas, and I thought it was, I made these big decisions, and this is what I was going to do for my life, and it was hard to make that decision. And then once I got my first job, I moved to British Columbia and worked as a graphic designer in a full-time job situation where I had dental plan, and it was like a real job. I was an adult. I had my own place, and but I hated it. As a youngster, while I was in college and in high school, I liked working at different types of jobs, and so I was always had 2 or 3 part-time jobs on the go, and doing a variety of things was really where I was at, and working full-time where I thought I was working towards that in college to get my full-time job as a graphic designer wasn't actually, it was one of the hardest things I did in my life, deciding that no, I didn't want to do that. But I still wanted to do graphic design, but I ended up doing that on a freelance basis. And so I had my first graphic design job in Vancouver, and also came to the realization that I don't like big cities, and immigrating to Montreal and living in Montreal and Toronto, those are pretty big cities, and they never felt like home. But Victoria, being a small island, and the community there, and it was my first time actually feeling like I found a home, and eventually I decided that I needed a new home, and so what did I write here? You probably all read it. Do you want me to read it? I worked in retail clothing, variety store, bath and bedtime shop, pharmacist assistants, and my most favorite was an art supply store where I jumped around, and I'd still work in an art supply store. I love seeing what new products, and I love always experimenting with new possibilities, and you know, that you get to see what's out there. So I already talked about Vancouver, Ontario College of Art. I also did printmaking. Once I moved to BC, I did end up going back after I quit my full-time job and started doing freelance work as a graphic designer. I did do some printmaking at Ontario College of Art, and I did continuously do printmaking before that, learning it from my step-grandfather. But I learned so much more. There's so many different types of printmaking, and I got to really experience the different techniques. I also continued while I was in BC because I was doing freelance graphic design. While I was in school, I didn't learn anything on computer. It was all hands-on. And I moved into an age where everything was done on the computer, but I didn't have the computer experience because that wasn't part of my training. So I had to get that experience. So I've constantly, over the years, I'm always taking classes. I learn a lot also from teaching classes, almost the same in some ways, except when you're taking a class, you get to really dive into it. So wanted to promote that you should always be growing, and anything of interest is worth the investment. There's so many different workshops that aren't really that expensive, and there is funding out there as well to have all these different experiences. And because I like doing a variety of things, it's constantly a way of growing and learning how to integrate your new things that you're learning into what you're already up to. So I think I got into paper making before I got into book arts. And paper making I learned just actually like through books, and I learned how not to do it, and then I took a class and learned how to do it, and and I started making so much paper that I needed to do something with the paper. So then I got into bookmaking and played around with it a little on my own, just learning through books, and eventually taking classes and apprenticing and internships, and those kind of ways of learning are wicked. Like I really, those are highlights in my life, those experiences. I ended up doing an apprenticeship, or it was called an internship, in upstate New York. A girlfriend was out there, and that was my connection. And she invited me to come out because they needed an intern. It was at the Women's Studio Workshop in upstate New York. It's about 2 hours outside of the city. Small little community, really like all these quirky, interesting, creative people from the city moved out there. It was a wicked place to be. And I ended up staying for a year, and it was full-on studio of printmaking, paper making, book arts. They had all the up-to-date gear, and it was like a haven. It was definitely one of the main highlights in my life, and taught me so much, and made me feel more confident. And I also grew with all the different experiences I got from them, meeting other artists, and just so much of a wealth of knowledge that you can gain from that type of experience. I also did an apprenticeship, so I think I did walk through some years of, after WSW, I returned to Victoria and applied my newfound knowledge to make handmade papers, letterpress printing, and bookbinding. Continued freelance design work, taking workshops, printing, and making art books. And I just continuously took classes within the community, and growing that way. Here are some art books that I created after my women's studio workshop internship. And eventually I needed to get those books out there and meet more people that were making books and doing printmaking and doing the kind of things that I was interested in. Because there aren't a huge amount of people out there, but they are scattered throughout Canada. And so I traveled across Canada and with the sole purpose of connecting with other artists and selling my books and just totally inhale anything and everything to do with the things that I was into. I think everybody, when you go travel, you seek out the things that you're into, and that's how it determines what you're experiencing in your travels. So I experienced Newfoundland looking for somewhere to relocate from Victoria. And didn't know about St. Michael's Print Shop until that cross-Canada trip, and stayed for about 3 months and did a project at St. Michael's Print Shop. Worked with a lot of different organizations in town and got a really nice feel for the community here, and knew that this was where I needed to relocate. When I went back to Victoria, I did end up going to England to do an apprenticeship, and that just obviously was what I needed to do. So I learned more bookbinding and letterpress printing, and I did want to relocate and did want to be somewhere different. And I think if it wasn't about visas and if I had a passport to the world, I might still be there, because I did discover a small little community in England, Frome, Somerset, and started up a community print studio, and was selling my artwork, and life was good. Like being able to survive and doing what you want to do is, I wasn't doing graphic design, and it was all solely stuff that I just love. So I did stay for a year, because that was as long as they'd let me. And when I came back to Victoria, that's when I ended up on my journey back to relocate to St. John's. And that really doesn't have a lot to do with craft, but it has a lot to do with how, what's made me who I am. Everybody said something funny and no one's laughing. I need to say something funny. Thank you. So moving here in 2001 officially, a big part of why I love it here is I think there is opportunity as a creative person. The community, art community here is very strong and supportive, and it's the opportunities are there. Like I feel like you come up with an idea and the support network is there. People aren't like stepping on each other to get ahead. They're all working together, and that's important to me. And it's really, for me, I'm not concerned about getting my work or getting well known around the world or anything like that. It's more about being able to survive doing the things I like to do and always growing. And so surviving, making art. I'm into ceramics right now. The past 3 years I've been focused on that. When I was living in Victoria, I did have a couple years in ceramics, I just taking classes through the community studio there, and learning a lot. But by the time, ceramics is so time consuming, and it's not necessarily when you're first starting a way of making money. So it was hard for me to justify up until 3 years ago, again, getting back into it. Here at the Craft Council Play Studio has a community studio there. So I now rent studio space there and work out of there. And and I'm making functional as well as sculptural work there. And the other venue where I show and sell my work is the Leighton Gallery, which is also in town. And so painting and caustics is still holding strong for me, and that's something that I'm still doing a lot of. I like incorporating my new interests into my old interests, and somehow that keeps me happy. Applying for grants, project grants, after a certain stage. My husband is also a visual artist, and he is very savvy and good at writing about his art and applying for grants, and that's something that I'm not good at. And writing about what I do is, I'd rather show you. But having that support had made a big difference. The idea of being paid to make artwork by applying for a project grant was a wonderful surprise to me. I never didn't know that existed until I moved here. That has made a big difference, being able to grow as an artist, a visual artist. I teach through the Art Smarts, which is in the schools, and it's a government-funded program. So K to 6 grades primarily, and take all the different things that I like to do and try to influence young people. I teach all ages. I also teach out at the Anita Singh Centre. But teaching is, I think, is very important as well, because it's not just, I learn so much from other people. Like, there's so many other ways of doing things, and I think it's not just my interest in sharing the joy of being a creator with other people and seeing them blossom, but it's also I'm taking back a lot and learning from other people as well. So teaching is a big part of probably half my income, and the other half is what I generate through the gallery sales. And I also I have different kind of like, I also make smaller scale items like cards, and do lino cutting, and that's something that I've been doing since I was quite small, and I just continuously do that. Some of the images I print are like 20 years old, and some of them are this year, but most. So cards and magnets. I used to do hand-painted shirts. I think what I want to get across to you guys is that I'm sure you have lots of different interests, and to go out there into the community and go to the galleries, go to the art centers, and connect with other people in the community that are at different stages, and you'll find your niche, and you'll grow from that, and it's really important to get yourself out there. So, professional practice. So I do sit on and have sat on different boards and committees, and teach in various other, outside of Anna Templeton, and in the schools, various other places. I forgot what I was doing. Here we go. So there's some book arts. The books that I generally make these days are not with content. It's so time consuming that I haven't, my time consuming joy right now is clay, that I'm not going that. But I do occasionally. I'm not printing cards or doing magnets and trying to wholesale them or any of that. I do it because I still like doing it, and I only do it when I feel like I need to and want to. But it does bring some income. It's a trickle, though. It's not like something I'm putting a lot of time and energy to. And I think having my eggs in so many baskets. Somehow it just magically all works out, and I can pay the mortgage and feed my family, and I'm pretty blessed. Let's see what else I got here. My first solo show was in 2004. Getting your work out there and picking the right venue for your work, and in group shows are the way to start. And once you start producing more work and getting more refined with your own style and what you're up to, then you'll have your own solo show. So here's just some artwork from the years. And printmaking has been primarily my base, but like I said, the past 3 years I've been focused more on clay. Rug hooking and making quilts out of paper, recycling my paper, my print work, and turning it into something else, rejuvenating it, and cutting up fabric. I love making use of things that are old and giving them new life. And here's some clay work. So the bottom pieces here, if I touch this, will that happen? No. The bottom right-hand pieces are encaustic paintings, and I started incorporating clay sculptures on top of them. And so encaustic and ceramic work is primarily where I'm at. So here's a variety of different exhibitions, and most of them are probably group shows, and I like group shows because usually there's a theme, and then it gives you a barrier to focus on. Otherwise, it's all anything's possible. Right now I have my work in 2 exhibitions in town. There's at the Craft Council, there's the home show that Philippa curated. And so I have a few ceramic pieces there. And I also have a ceramic installation at the Eastern Edge Gallery. And if you don't know either of those places, or you haven't explored them, you should. There's a lot of places to explore in St. John's, and of course outside of the city. Long-term goals are to have exhibitions outside of the province. That's been a long-term goal for a while. But first you gotta create it and hold on to it, and document it and apply to have it shown somewhere, and I haven't figured that out yet. I think most of the work I create ends up going out there, and it's not in large scale, it's smaller trickles, and so I have to start building up a body of work that I can start doing that, and that is a long-term goal. And just to emphasize that you applying for residencies and apprenticing with other people and going out into the art community and really putting yourself in there is what you guys need to be doing. Let's see, that was it.